The wedding cake was still being served downstairs when Garrison Kellerman walked into room 312 at the Grand Phoenix Hotel. His wife of 4 hours, Evangeline, was supposed to be changing out of her wedding dress. Instead, he found her with his boss, Thaddeus Blackwood, in a position that would haunt him forever. What Garrison did next didn't just end his marriage. It sparked a criminal investigation that captivated the entire city of Phoenix and raised questions about justice, betrayal, and how far a person can be pushed before they break. This isn't your typical cheating spouse story. This is about a groom who discovered the ultimate betrayal on what should have been the happiest night of his life, and the split-second decision that changed everything. Before we get into the shocking details, I want to know, what would you do if you caught your spouse cheating on your wedding night? Let me know in the comments below. The events that unfolded at the Grand Phoenix Hotel that September evening would become one of the most debated criminal cases in Arizona history. To understand how a fairy tale wedding turned into a nightmare, we need to start from the beginning. Garrison Kellerman was the kind of man who believed in doing things the right way. At 32, he had worked his way up from junior accountant to senior financial analyst at Meridian Industries, one of Phoenix's most prestigious consulting firms. His colleagues respected him, his clients trusted him, and his boss, Thaddeus Blackwood, considered him indispensable. Evangeline Hartwell had captured Garrison's heart the moment she walked into that coffee shop on Camelback Road 2 years earlier. She was 28, a marketing coordinator with an infectious laugh and dreams of starting her own boutique agency. Their courtship was a whirlwind of weekend hiking trips in Sedona, intimate dinners at local restaurants, and long conversations about their future together. Friends described them as a perfect match. Garrison's steady, methodical nature balanced Evangeline's spontaneous spirit. He would plan elaborate surprise dates, while she would drag him to last-minute concerts and art gallery openings. Their social media was filled with photos of hiking adventures, couples cooking classes, and romantic getaways to Flagstaff. But beneath the surface of the seemingly ideal relationship, cracks were beginning to form. Garrison's dedication to his career meant longer hours at the office, weekend work sessions, and business trips that kept him away from home for days at a time. Evangeline, meanwhile, was struggling to establish her own professional identity while feeling increasingly isolated in their relationship. The pressure intensified when Thaddeus Blackwood took a special interest in Garrison's career. Late-night strategy sessions became routine, with Blackwood personally mentoring the young analyst on high-stakes client presentations. These sessions often extended well past midnight, leaving Garrison exhausted and Evangeline feeling neglected. What neither of them realized was that these late nights were about to set in motion a chain of events that would destroy everything they had built together. Evangeline began spending more time at Meridian Industries, bringing Garrison lunch or staying after hours to help with filing and administrative tasks. She told herself she was being supportive, but the truth was more complicated. She was lonely, and the office environment filled with ambitious professionals made her feel alive in ways her quiet home life no longer did. Blackwood noticed her immediately. At 45, he was everything Garrison wasn't, confident to the point of arrogance, wealthy beyond measure, and possessing the kind of charisma that commanded attention in any room. He had built Meridian Industries from nothing into a multi-million-dollar operation, and he wasn't used to being told no. The first time Blackwood asked Evangeline to join him for coffee to discuss supporting Garrison's career advancement, she should have declined. Instead, she found herself saying yes, rationalizing that it was for her fiancé's benefit. That coffee turned into lunch, then dinner, then private meetings that had nothing to do with Garrison's professional development. The Phoenix heat that August was merciless, but inside the climate-controlled offices of Meridian Industries, Evangeline found herself looking forward to her visits more than she cared to admit. What started as innocent conversations about Garrison's project had evolved into something far more dangerous. Blackwood was a master manipulator, skilled at reading people and exploiting their vulnerabilities. He recognized Evangeline's frustration with her stagnating career and her growing resentment toward Garrison's workaholic tendencies. During their private conversations, he would lean in close, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper as he shared industry secrets and promised to help launch a marketing agency. "You're wasting your talent," he would tell her, his hand lingering on her shoulder just a moment too long. "Someone with your vision deserves better than waiting at home for scraps of attention." The emotional affair began slowly. Text messages about business opportunities sent late at night when Garrison was working. Private lunches at upscale restaurants across town where they were unlikely to encounter anyone from their professional circles. Weekend meetings disguised as networking events that Evangeline would attend alone while Garrison buried himself in quarterly reports. Blackwood knew exactly what he was doing. He had built his empire by identifying weaknesses and exploiting them, and he applied the same ruthless strategy to his pursuit of Evangeline. He showered her with attention, validated her professional ambitions, and made her feel desired in ways she hadn't experienced in months. The physical affair began on a rainy Tuesday evening in September, just 6 weeks before the wedding. Garrison was in Los Angeles on a client presentation, and Evangeline had agreed to help Blackwood prepare for a board meeting. The office was empty except for the cleaning crew, and the atmosphere was charged with unspoken tension. When Blackwood finally kissed her in his corner office overlooking the city lights, Evangeline's resistance crumbled. All the months of feeling invisible, of competing with spreadsheets and conference calls for her fiancé's attention, culminated in that moment of betrayal. What followed was a month and a half of stolen moments, secret rendezvous, and an increasingly elaborate web of lies. Hotel rooms registered under false names, business trips that were actually romantic getaways, and careful coordination to avoid detection. Blackwood's wealth made it easy to cover their tracks. Private restaurants, secluded resorts, and cash transactions that left no digital footprint. Evangeline told herself she would end it after the wedding. The affair was a mistake, a temporary lapse in judgment brought on by pre-wedding stress and career frustrations. She convinced herself that once she was married, once she had Garrison's full attention again, everything would return to normal. But Blackwood had other plans. He had no intention of letting her go, and as the wedding date approached, he became increasingly possessive and demanding. The power dynamic that had initially attracted Evangeline now began to frighten her, but she felt trapped by her own choices. The wedding planning continued as if nothing had changed, but those closest to the couple began to notice subtle shifts in their dynamic. September 15th dawned clear and crisp, perfect Arizona weather for an outdoor ceremony. The Grand Phoenix Hotel's garden terrace had been transformed into a fairy tale setting with white roses, twinkling lights, and flowing silk drapes. 200 guests filled the ornate chairs, including Garrison's entire family from Ohio and Evangeline's relatives from California. Garrison stood at the altar in his charcoal gray tuxedo, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted his tie. His best man, college roommate Brandon Walsh, noticed the nervous energy radiating from his friend. "You good, man?" Brandon whispered, but Garrison just nodded, his eyes scanning the crowd for any sign of trouble. What Garrison didn't know was that his bride was fighting her own internal battle just 50 feet away in the bridal suite. Evangeline stood before a full-length mirror, her hands shaking as a maid of honor. Chloe Martinez attempted to secure her veil. The Vera Wang gown that had once filled her with joy now felt like a costume for a role she wasn't sure she wanted to play. Her phone buzzed with a text from Blackwood. "Last chance to call this off. Meet me at the Ritz-Carlton. We can be in Cabo by midnight." Evangeline's stomach churned as she deleted the message, but the damage was done. The guilt that had been eating away at her for weeks now threatened to consume her entirely. She had tried to end things with Blackwood multiple times, but each attempt had been met with threats about her career, her reputation, and Garrison's future at Meridian Industries. The ceremony proceeded flawlessly. Garrison's voice cracked with emotion as he recited his vows, promising to love, honor, and cherish the woman who had already broken those promises in the most devastating way possible. Evangeline spoke her vows mechanically, the words feeling hollow as they left her lips. Among the wedding guests, Blackwood sat in the back row, his presence a constant reminder of the secret that threatened to destroy everything. He had insisted on attending, claiming it would look suspicious if he didn't show up to support his star employee's wedding. But his real motivation was far darker. He wanted to watch Evangeline suffer through the ceremony, knowing she belonged to him. The reception was held in the hotel's grand ballroom, where champagne flowed freely and the 12-piece orchestra played classic love songs. Garrison and Evangeline shared their first dance to At Last by Etta James, but even in that romantic moment, the bride's eyes kept drifting to the back of a room where Blackwood stood watching with a predatory smile. As the evening progressed, Blackwood made his move. During the father-daughter dance, he approached Evangeline and whispered in her ear, "Room 312. 1 hour." The color drained from her face, but she nodded almost imperceptibly, sealing both their fates. What happened next would depend on a series of split-second decisions that would change multiple lives forever. The celebration continued around them, but beneath the surface, a perfect storm was building. The reception was in full swing when Evangeline excused herself, claiming she needed to freshen up and change out of her wedding dress. The elaborate gown had become increasingly uncomfortable as the evening wore on, and she told Garrison she would slip into something more comfortable for the after-party. Garrison barely looked up from his conversation with his college fraternity brothers, who had traveled from across the country to celebrate with him. He was finally relaxing, the champagne loosening his tongue as he regaled them with stories about his recent promotion and the new house he and Evangeline had just purchased in Scottsdale. Meanwhile, Evangeline made her way through the hotel corridors, her heart pounding with each step. She had tried to resist Blackwood's summons, but his earlier threats about destroying Garrison's career echoed in her mind. Blackwood had made it clear that he owned her, and tonight would be no different. Room 312 was on the 3rd floor, far from the wedding festivities below. Evangeline knocked softly, and the door opened immediately. Blackwood had been waiting, having changed out of his wedding attire into a silk robe that left little to the imagination about his intentions. "I was beginning to think you developed a conscience," he said, pulling her into the room. The space was dimly lit with candles, and champagne sat chilling in an ice bucket, a grotesque parody of a honeymoon suite. Back in the ballroom, Garrison realized he hadn't seen his bride in over an hour. The band had just finished playing Sweet Caroline, and he wanted to share a private moment with Evangeline before the evening got too late. He asked Chloe if she had seen the bride, but the maid of honor assumed Evangeline was still changing. Concern growing, Garrison made his way to the bridal suite, but found it empty except for Evangeline's wedding dress hanging carefully in the closet. Her phone was charging on the nightstand, and her evening shoes were placed neatly by the door, but there was no sign of his wife. Hotel security footage would later reveal that Garrison spent 20 minutes searching the common areas, increasingly frantic as he checked the lobby, the restaurant, and even the parking garage. It was pure chance that led him to the 3rd floor. He had decided to check if Evangeline had gone to their honeymoon suite to rest. The hallway was quiet, most guests having retired for the evening or still enjoying the reception downstairs. Garrison was about to turn back when he heard familiar laughter coming from room 312. His blood ran cold as he recognized both voices. His wife and his boss engaged in intimate conversation. The rational part of his mind insisted there had to be an innocent explanation. Maybe they were discussing business, or perhaps Blackwood was offering career advice. But something in his gut told him otherwise, and he found himself pressing his ear to the door. What he heard next would haunt him for the rest of his life. The sounds coming from room 312 left no doubt about what was happening inside. Garrison's world collapsed in that moment. 4 hours of marriage dissolving into a nightmare of betrayal and rage. His hands shook as he used his hotel keycard, a master key he had obtained from the front desk by claiming he needed to check on his wife's welfare. The door opened silently, and what Garrison saw would be burned into his memory forever. Evangeline and Blackwood were so engrossed in their passion that they didn't notice him standing in the doorway. For a moment, time seemed suspended as Garrison processed the scene before him. His wife, still wearing her wedding lingerie, wrapped in the arms of the man who had controlled his professional life for years. "You son of a bitch!" Garrison's voice cut through the room like a blade. Both lovers turned in shock, but it was Blackwood who recovered first. With characteristic arrogance, he didn't even attempt to cover himself. Instead, he smiled that predatory grin that had intimidated so many business rivals over the years. "Garrison, you're a little early for the honeymoon suite," Blackwood said, his voice dripping with mockery. Though I suppose, technically, this is your honeymoon." Evangeline scrambled for her robe, tears streaming down her face. "Garrison, I can explain." "Explain what?" Garrison's voice was eerily calm, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside him. "Explain how you've been sleeping with my boss. Explain how you made a mockery of our wedding vows. Explain how you destroyed everything we built together." What happened next will become the subject of intense legal debate and media speculation. Garrison, a man who had never been in a fight in his life, who had built his career on careful analysis and measured responses, snapped completely. He lunged at Blackwood with a fury that surprised everyone in the room, including himself. The two men crashed into the hotel room's expensive furniture, sending champagne bottles and crystal glasses flying. Blackwood, despite being older, was larger and stronger, but Garrison fought with the desperate rage of a man who had lost everything. The struggle was brief but violent. In the chaos, Blackwood struck his head against the marble corner of the hotel room's fireplace. The sound was sickening, and suddenly the room fell silent except for Evangeline's screams. Blackwood lay motionless, blood pooling beneath his head. Garrison stood over him, his tuxedo torn and his knuckles bloody, staring at what he had done. The man who had stolen his wife, who had manipulated and controlled both their lives, was dead. Within minutes, hotel security arrived, followed by Phoenix police. The wedding celebration 3 floors below continued, unaware that the evening of joy had transformed into a crime scene that would dominate local headlines for months. The case of Garrison Kellerman would raise questions about justifiable homicide, temporary insanity, and the limits of human endurance. Some called him a cold-blooded killer, others a man pushed beyond his breaking point. The jury would ultimately decide his fate, but the city of Phoenix would never forget the wedding night that ended in death. The aftermath of that September night changed multiple lives forever. Garrison Kellerman was charged with second-degree murder, though his defense team argued for manslaughter based on extreme emotional disturbance. The trial became a media sensation, with public opinion sharply divided between those who saw him as a victim of betrayal and those who viewed him as a man who let rage consume him. Evangeline disappeared from public view, but court records show she testified for the prosecution, describing the affair and the events leading up to Blackwood's death. Her testimony was devastating, revealing months of manipulation and emotional abuse that had trapped her in a web of lies. The case raises uncomfortable questions about marriage, betrayal, and justice. When someone destroys your life, when they take everything you've worked for and twist it into something ugly, how do you respond? Where's the line between justice and revenge? What do you think? Was Garrison's reaction understandable, or did he cross a line that can never be uncrossed? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and remember, the truth is often stranger than fiction, and sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who hurt us the deepest. Until next time, please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share for more crime stories.